Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Work Life podcast, where we talk about how the world of work and our attitudes to work are changing. If we haven't met before, my name is Pilar Orti and I am your host, and this is another guest episode really touching on how our attitudes to work are changing. And this is a really, I'm so privileged to have a show where I can meet wonderful people and discover lots about them while I have a conversation on the podcast without worrying about making small talk. And I get to ask lots of questions. And I don't think I've ever had anyone say, I'd rather not answer that. So thank you to all our guests. And thank you to Amale Ghalbouni, who is today's guest. You will find out a little bit more about her in a second. And it was a great conversation where we really talk about her own experience through the world of work, what she's found some of her clients, she's an executive coach, struggle with, how we show up at work. She was very open about how she's worked through burnout herself. Really, really lovely conversation. So without further ado, before we go, I always forget, virtualnotdistant.com is the place to find out the show notes for this podcast and everything else you want to know about the kind of work we create over there. But for now, I will leave you with my conversation with Amale. Hello and welcome to another episode of the 21st Century Work Life podcast. I'm your host, Pilar Orti, and today with me I have an executive leadership coach and the founder of The Brick Coach. And I'm going to let her introduce herself to you listeners.
Hi, I'm Amale Ghalbouni.
So Amale, we've met on LinkedIn. You are, as you say, an executive leadership coach. Actually, you're also a facilitator and a business growth strategist. And you're much more than that, which is why I'm delighted to be talking to you today. What do you say now when people ask you, what do you do?
My first question is, how much time do you have?
We've got about 25 minutes today. That's a great answer. And then how would you... So if I say, I've got all the time in the world, what might we hear next?
I tend to say that I spent the last 15 years in strategy and innovation consulting. I've worked with everybody from really small scale startups to large FTSE 100s and Fortune 500 companies. And now I primarily do two things. I do more things, but I primarily do two things. I'm an executive coach. I work with leaders who got to the stage in their career where they feel like they're spending about 80% of their time on admin and on politics, and they're not doing the thing that lights them up and gets them really passionate anymore. And they want to reconnect with that sense of purpose, that sense of meaning, that sense of intentionality. And I also help them build better and higher performing teams. So I help the leaders be in a better place themselves, but also help make the most out of their team and help their teams perform more effectively more often.
And where does the Brick Coach come into this? Is this your primary avenue for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my executive coaching is a private practice. I work one-on-one primarily with folks, and the Brick Coach is more on the team effectiveness side of things. So it's very much experiential training workshops to bring teams together and help them open up, build better connections, build better alignment on where they're heading together, and learn how to creatively problem solve issues as they come up.
So something from my own experience and from the world I move around between coaches and consultants, I know that very few people set up when they're, what do you want to be when you grow up, when you're 7? Very few people say, I want to be a coach. I want to be an executive coach. I love your story, which I have to say you have so beautifully on your website, which for everyone listening, it's amale.co, and that is AMALE.co. You've got quite a story to how you arrived at where you are now. Where would you say that would start?
I grew up in Beirut, very different from London. I've been here for a while, but I grew up in Beirut. I grew up in a war. I absolutely did not want to become a coach when I grew up. I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up. When I was a kid, and then I realized that you had to be physically really fit, and I decided that's probably not the right avenue for me. I then wanted to become an actress, and my dad basically very sensibly said, are you sure? Because that doesn't really pay well.
It's a
Definitely not
very
here.
tough life, I can tell you. Yes.
So I ended up going to uni to study economics and then finance, and I thought I'd get into investment banking. And I turned up to the UK in 2008 looking for a job in investment banking. In 2008, so I put on the TV, realized that
Oh,
I
that was
chose,
very good timing, wasn't it?
like the banks were collapsing, everybody was being fired. It was not the best time. So I think pivoting is definitely a theme for me because like I never planned for any of this. I tend to follow whatever feels right, whatever opportunity sounds exciting. So banking failed miserably, moved on to strategy consulting, did that for a while. I did that for about 6 years freelance. I worked with really big companies like the BBC, Amazon, FTSE 100 companies. And I got bored of telling people what to do and I wanted to do it. So I moved into innovation to do it. And then over time, I realized that the most important outcome of any of our work as consultants is the change we help organizations with. And mostly that's on the human side rather than just like on launching a new product or a new business or whatever, but actually helping people work better or embed new ways of working in certain organizations. So I started like moving more towards that organizational transformation, more of the mindset coaching, more of the team training side of things. And it just felt like a natural continuation somehow.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Regardless of where you start, especially when you are right at where you are now, you look back and you go, "Yeah, I can see, and I can see what was going on, and I can see why I was going there." And when, it's you missed the part that actually got me going in your about page, where you said that you sold cakes and chocolates for a living as well. Where does that come into?
I've always had a job on the side of like either my school or a side of university, which is not necessarily very common, but I just always really valued my independence. So I always had a job. And I always took on roles that I wasn't sure I could do because I'm never going to find out if I can do them or not if I don't try them. So my first ever job was walking around downtown Beirut at night and giving people free chocolate to promote like a luxury Belgian chocolate shop. I was 16, I was super introverted, I was terrified of speaking to strangers, and that was my job.
What a nightmare.
It is a nightmare. It absolutely was. But also, I still think of the guy who ran the shop. He hired me. It was a month-long project, and like we did that on weekends. And the first couple of weekends, I just didn't want to talk to anybody because, like, what do you mean walk up to strangers at night and just go, "Hi there, can I offer you some free chocolate?" Like I can see you like cringe. That's exactly how I felt. But I was really lucky that I got paired with somebody who was super extroverted and she was really kind. She's like, "You look like you're struggling. Do you want to come and hang out with me and like see how it's done?" And the owner of the business at the end of the month, he's like, "I don't really care how much chocolate I sold. I'm really proud of how much you have changed over the last month." Because he was observing us and he realized that like where I started was absolutely not where I ended. And I was really grateful for the opportunity.
Someone could read loads into that and say, well, maybe that's where the seed was dropped of your interest in helping people grow. We can read all sorts of stuff in the book, but that's a great one. And the only thing I had to do that was a little bit similar to that was when I used to run a theatre company and promoting the show in Edinburgh and go to people and hand them out a flyer. Yes, I feel your pain. But how nice as well that you, even then, actually, you did have someone that you could be role model by. You know, you had someone who, and actually, I don't know. And tell me what you think of this. I'm hearing somebody acknowledged how difficult it was for you, and someone acknowledged that actually you could do with some support. and you could do with some role modeling. Do you think that that is half of the battle when we are helping people, or just one of the things? I don't know. It's just coming up my mind.
I love the observation, and I don't think I had thought about that in that one instance, but absolutely. Like growing up, I was good at school, so I was just always expected to do more, to be better, but like never told how to improve. Like even when I was top three in my class, like, you can do better. I'm like, but why? How? Like, talk to me. What's up? And I think it's easy as leaders to just tell our teams that they need to work harder or to deliver more or to hit like a certain target. But the acknowledging that they might not be equipped to do that, or that they might be struggling with even understanding the goal itself, and like spending time on this, making sure that that is something that they want to achieve, making sure they understand what they need to do to achieve that, making sure that we as leaders know what they need in terms of support, and we're able to support them the way they expect us to. I think that's really important. Yeah. I hadn't read that into that story, but you're absolutely right.
Oh, now you can use it if you want. People love stories. And what happens as well when you tell that story, I'm still smelling the Belgian chocolate. I don't know what you were, but I'm still smelling that. I mean, today's conversation, I think I'm very happy to just see where it takes us, just have the listeners enjoy your story, enjoy your insights, because I think I see it as quite a 21st century mindset shift, that we are allowed to talk about big career shifts, that we are allowed to say, like you're saying, well, I just saw where my interests were taking me and I tried things and see where it took me. How much of your own experience do you use when you're working with your clients? Because if you're saying you're helping executives to really basically find, almost rekindle their fire, I think I'm putting words in your mouth, that's what I'm taking from it. How much do you use your experience consciously or unconsciously, or subconsciously, not unconsciously?
A little bit, but it really depends on the client. And I think like that's one of the biggest things in coaching, is you cannot coach everybody the same way. You have to be adaptable, and you have to understand, to your point, you have to understand what the person is expecting of you and how best you can support them to get to that realization. So if it were up to me, I want everybody to make really big, drastic changes, and I want them to pursue their passions and like embrace their sense of adventures. But sometimes clients, they want the space to be able to externalize what they're struggling with, to be able to say, I'm really struggling with my confidence, and I want to say no more often to this one person who keeps on asking me for favors. And it's not my place to say, that's not a big enough transformation, push harder. My place is to go, if that's the support you need, then how can I give you that? So I lean on my experience, and I think that's what makes me me, and that's what draws clients to me. But when I'm either in the midst of delivering a one-on-one coaching session with somebody, or when I'm in a team session, I always park my own opinion to the side. Like I might float it as an option, but it's not up to me to dictate the pace that a client can move at, or dictate the direction they head in, which is really hard as somebody who spent 15 years in consulting. Like literally my job was to tell people what to do. And now I just have to slow down, figure out what they need, and just give them that and nothing else. And it's tough.
Yeah, well, it's a very different profession, even though it's clumped a lot under the same umbrella, but the reality is very different. And I imagine when you've come from that place, well, you haven't come from that place, but when you have something that you could say is similar, it must be very hard not to go back to that. But as you say, you're still you, and that's what you're bringing. So it's in your DNA, I would say. And why do you think you can coach people around this? Not your skills, but what is it that is missing then in these leaders that means they've ended up doing, as you said, lots of admin, that they're not really going the way in which they wanted? What are some of the things that has happened for them to be in the place where they benefit now from working with you, and where they need that change?
That's a good question. And I think it depends on the person I work with. But in a lot of instances, clients that gravitate towards me tend to be overachievers. They tend to be people who are like always pushed for more. Like you get a promotion, great. What's the next one? You've got a team of three, great. How do you double that? You've got a budget, great. How do you get more money? You're working with this client. What's the next big thing that you can do? It's this constant chasing of the next thing. I call it the SOS syndrome, the shiny object syndrome. I also have it.
We all,
And we don't we all?
a lot of us, yeah.
And I think like the folks that I work with, they have also gone on that same journey where they've chased the next thing for so long, and they stopped asking, why am I chasing this? They just felt the need to chase it because that's what success, that's what we're told success is, right? Like success is getting a promotion, success is getting a mortgage, success is getting a bigger team, success is landing a big client if you're in an agency and you're going for a pitch for multiple millions of pounds. So you constantly chase the thing, but you stop asking, why am I doing this? Is this even what I want? And I tend to work with people who have done that for such a long period of time, like 10 years, 20 years, sometimes 30 years. And they got to the point where they're like, is that even what I want? I'm not sure. And there's usually like a little catalyst. Either they've burned out or something big has happened in their personal life that made them reassess their priority, like have kids, get married, get divorced, whatever that might be. Or they might have been passed off for promotion or been made redundant, and all of a sudden their sense of worth has been shaken up because they don't have the job that was such a big part of their identity. And those moments tend to trigger that question of, is this even what I want?
I mean, for me, I think this is quite a, I don't know if it's quite a modern phenomenon. It certainly always feels like it's a luxury phenomenon in a way. And I think it comes from, as a society, and especially in knowledge work and the kind of people that we hang out with in a way, there is that acceptance that work is more now when you can than putting food on the table. And I'm just wondering, I don't know, what do you think about that?
I'm so glad that's changed, like growing up, I like my parents' generation. It was like you pick a job and that's what you do, and it's your job, and that's it. You don't have to change. You just keep doing the same thing forever. Like I grew up in Beirut. Some people ran their businesses until they died, and then their kids would inherit it, and then like the same business will continue, and nobody would ever question, is this what I want? So I'm glad that's changed because like like you say, like we have such a luxury, we have such a privilege to be able to at any point go, I'm not sure that's what I want anymore. I would like to explore running a theater next year, or I would like to explore going and becoming a digital nomad for the next 6 months. And I think that freedom is amazing. I think the biggest difference that I sometimes notice is our relationship to work is really dependent on the culture we grew up in. Like where I grew up, work was a tiny part of what you did. Like your social life, your family, your friends is more important than what you did for work. Of course, you had to be a doctor or an engineer or or a lawyer or a director of a company if you could, but it was just a title. In terms of like the weight it had in your life, it wasn't that much. And in some countries, like I was working with a French client recently, and work is not that big of a part of their life. They go to work, they leave work, and then that's where their real life begins. Whereas like in the UK or in the US, work is such a big part of our identity that it's super important for people to feel like it's okay to stop sometimes and go, whoa, am I still on track here? Is this still what I want? Otherwise, there's a real crisis of identity that sometimes happens when you don't give yourself that time to pause, when you just keep on carrying on and you run and run and run and run, chase the next promotion, and then you hit a wall, you go, wait, I haven't cared about this for the last 10 years, and that's been everything I've done for the last 10 years. So I think it's really lucky that we get to stop and we get to reassess and we get to change. I think also like that relationship and the importance we put on work is something that I'm starting to see more and more of, and people reassessing how important work is as part of their life, as part of their identity. And I'm guessing we're going to see more of that in the next few years.
Yeah, I think it spills over in ways that, I mean, I'm going to go back to something I really, that I went, wow, on your website, it's something quite personal that you said. Let me just see, in your website. Oh, and you've got an animation. I've just noticed it. Oh, that is really funny. You picking up the phone. Is it a GIF? I love it. I haven't seen this before. That's funny animation. You've got this question on your website which says, that's all great after you've talked about your work, but who are you outside of work, Amale? And you've said, for years I couldn't answer that question. Work was my identity. And that, I think, that comes back to what you were saying about this relationship with work. And sometimes it does spill into our personal lives, not because of the fact that, we get pings and stuff like that, not the more practical and visible, but actually it can really seep into our lives without realizing. Yes, tell us about that section on the website. Who are you outside of work, Amale?
It's so true, right? Like if you met somebody at like a networking dinner or whatever, and you say, "Who are you?" Or if I met you, I'll say, "Hey, tell me more about you." The first thing you're likely to tell me is what your job is. You're not going to tell me, "This is my name. This is where I grew up. This is what I enjoy doing outside of work. These are my hobbies. This is what I miss doing from when I was younger. This is what I'm like within a team." Nobody says that.
Yeah.
But you ask, especially in places like the UK and the US, you meet somebody, you go, "Who are you?" And they go, "Oh, hi, my name is John Smith, and I'm an accountant." Like, great, John Smith, tell me more about you. And John Smith's going to tell me where John Smith is from and like whether they're married or not. But there's not a lot of people don't do a lot of reflection on what lights them up and what they do outside of work. Like when you're so attached to when your identity is so attached to the work that you do, when you've put so much effort into getting the promotion, getting the job, and getting the team, and getting all the things that you're told are really important and you do value as well. But when you've put so much effort into that, you kind of lose track of who you are outside of work. And it's not just me. Like I work with clients who find the hardest question to answer is, who are you? Just who are you?
Yeah. And yes, I'm just, now you've thrown the question at me, of course, my attention's gone there. That's really interesting. So I go to some dance classes on Wednesdays, and there's a lady there, and once we had a class with only the two of us, and so we got talking afterwards. I don't usually talk very much to the people in the classes, but but she, I don't know, we were talking about dancing, blah, blah, and we talked about what work we did. And I told her, oh, I'm putting aside the consultancy work and I'm just going to be writing and podcasting from now on. Yeah. And then she sees it to me like 3 months later. She says, how's the work going? How's the business going? And I was like, what business, what work? I don't even know if I call this work what I'm doing now, And then you start with the philosophical question, well, what is work? Is writing when no one is paying to write work? I feel like it's work. It's, for me, it's creating. It comes under that umbrella. But so, yeah. And I think you are so right that especially when you are meeting new people in a professional way, it's always, hi, I am blah, blah, and I do this. And it's always a title or something like this. So for you, so if I ask you, oh, who are you in this kind of setting, what tends to come out now?
Depending on the person, like you say, if I meet them in a kind of a professional context, I would say like I'm an executive strategy director, and now I'm a coach and I help teams work better together. If I meet them in a personal setting, I say, hi, I'm Amale. Tell me more about you.
Oh, I love it. Deflect the question.
Oh, yes. As an introvert, I'm better at listening than talking. So like I flip the question on on the person I'm meeting. Or I say, I'm Amale. What do you want to know?
I love that. Wow, I think, you're giving me, I'm going to write these down when I'm editing. This is fantastic. It's really good. What I find interesting about this conversation and reflecting on it, and what being a worker in the 21st century is, especially in our bubbles, is that there start to be some options. And even you've already given me some options. Okay, we can come forward with our work persona. We can come forward with another kind of persona. And I think that this is, I hope there'll be more of this, more of a choice of people who are very linked to their identities at work. And that's who they come forward with, and people who actually want to detach themselves from that because for whatever reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit more then about the kind of work you do with teams, because I think this might be I might find this interesting as well. And actually, just going back a little bit more about that, if you're working with an exec, how does it usually work out? Do you see that there's a need to work as well with the team, or usually do you work with teams who separately, it's completely different to I work with an executive? Where does the work with teams come in?
They can be separate, they can be together. Like sometimes I work with teams that I don't work with the leaders of at all. We were talking about who are you at work, and that's sometimes a question I ask teams, and it's always fascinating to see what comes up. Spoiler alert.
Oh.
My business is called the Brick Coach, and it's called the Brick Coach because we use Lego bricks
Okay.
to help teams work better together. The clue's in the name. So people get to build their little identities with Lego, and they get to share some of the stories they have. For your listeners, I've got a model here of my quarterly priorities that's been sitting on my desk. It's got 7 bricks, and it's been keeping me on track for the last 3 months. I'll put this down now. I found one of the biggest challenges in 21st century work is that people don't necessarily connect with each other as much as they did before, especially post-pandemic. Like there's been a shift to hybrid work, there's been a shift to asynchronous work, there's been a shift for people working sometimes off-site, sometimes in the office, and teams don't just come together as much as they did before. And if they do, it's not as spontaneous. If they do, it's not necessarily as bonding as it used to be pre-pandemic in some companies. I'm not saying everybody's the same. So what I try to do a lot of with the Brick Coach, me and the associates I work with, what we try to do is to help teams connect like on a deeply human level by like sharing stories like what was your first job, or who are you outside of work, or tell me more about you and what makes you you at work. And one story just really stuck with me. Loads of stories come to mind, but one specifically came to mind when you were talking about who are you at work. Somebody built a model, 2 people last year answered that question with lost. I am lost at work. And like for me, that was such a powerful thing for them to say in front of other team members. The first person was a new mom going back to work, and her identity has changed because her priority has changed, and she's come back to work and her confidence has been knocked back, and she's expected to come back and perform at the level she performed at before going off on maternity leave. And she built a little model of a boat. And she's like, I don't know where I'm going. Like sometimes I feel like I might capsize. I don't know who I am at work anymore. I have no solid grounding, and everything keeps on pushing me in all of these different directions, and I don't know who I am anymore. And like blew my mind. Similar story for the second person, but some of the conversations we have are deeply personal because I feel like that's where teams bond. Because when you know that somebody on your team is struggling with something, that's when you can offer help. Like you said earlier, it's spotting what kind of support somebody needs and being able to offer it that makes you stronger as a team. And more broadly, we help teams collaborate better together. So we help them communicate better, collaborate better, creatively problem solve things as well, and ultimately help them walk away with a better understanding of who they are as human beings so that they can lean on each other and like know like why their priorities might be off at certain times, or why they might be struggling with something. And we help them build clarity on where they're headed together as a team, especially in a season of M&A and redundancies, and who knows what our strategy is going to be this year. Like it's so important for teams to have like one common goal. Otherwise,
otherwise you're as lost as the lady with her boat. Yeah.
Exactly.
But that for me as well is so I mean, not everyone enjoys this still, but this giving teams space to get to know each other and for people to be able to vocalize what they need. I mean, we'll go back to the what they need help with, like this person. When else do you have the time to say, hey, everyone, I am lost? And of course, the power of metaphor and being able to express that through building Lego, whatever it is, or drawing, or whatever is even stronger because it allows us, it gives us even more permission. But to be able to say that, I think it's really important. And also, like you say, this to give us the space for the change, another acceptance that the change that happens in our personal lives is going to impact who we are at work, how we work, and even how we perform. And acknowledging that. Yeah, that's really good. And so you said you work with other associates, you were saying?
Yes, I've got a bunch of really cool coaches, facilitators, trainers who come from all sorts of backgrounds, from like L&D backgrounds, but also from like commercial backgrounds, strategic background, design backgrounds, who all have like that passion to help build workplaces where people can be themselves, but also perform at their best more often.
Yeah. And how did you find them? How did they come to you? Or how did you find them?
Good question.
I mean, you'd have to be
Some
specific, but it's interesting.
Some people I stumbled on, like I met over the years, and I'm like, ooh, I like your vibe, or I think we align on our values and our priorities. And some just found the Brit Coach on the web, on the web, and got in touch and said, "Are you still looking?" I also at the Brit Coach we run a coach training course, so we train other coaches on how to use Lego Serious Play in their own practice. So if you join that, you can also choose to continue working with us going forward. So it's like a mixture. It's fairly eclectic as a collective of people.
Yeah, nice. And where does the traveling fit into all of this? Because you like traveling. Do you get to travel much?
Not in the last 6 months. I've only been away once in the last 6 months. But I mean, I guess that's the joy of trying to build a business.
Yes.
I had a day job until last summer. So until last summer, I kind of like I had a fairly good cadence of I knew exactly when I was going on holiday. It was around the bank holidays because I would get days off, etc. But now that I'm fully out on my own, I think I'm so committed to building the business and helping as many clients as I possibly can that I sometimes just hold myself back and go, "Are you sure you need to go on holiday now?" But having burnt out about 3 times, I know when to stop now. So I know when to go, and I'm walking away from this. Nope,
Right.
I need a break. Otherwise, I would repeat the same cycle. So yeah, going away on holiday in a couple of months.
Oh, nice. So how do you recognize then that you need to stop? How do you, what are for you the signs? I mean, 3 times. What have been the signs of burnout for you?
The first time it happened, I don't think I was aware of it. I became aware of it in retrospect. So at the time, I just pushed through it because it was during the pandemic. I was working remotely. It was a job that I really wanted and I fought to get, even when there was hiring freeze. I was so committed to it. I just chose to ignore all the warning signs. Last year, I actually decided to leave my day job because I burnt out for the third time. And I'm like, I can't. I am now so aware of my signs that I need to stop. And for me, it starts with mental exhaustion before it even gets to like physical exhaustion. I'm an overthinker and an overplanner, and I spend a lot of time in my head worrying about what ifs. So sometimes I get into a tizzy and I start overthinking things to the point where I can't see the wood from the trees, and I need to step away to be able to like get some perspective. I also weirdly I started becoming hyper aware of my breathing. So my breathing gets a lot more labored, and I start sighing a lot more when I'm getting to like the stage of physical exhaustion. I'm past the mental exhaustion, and like it's stepping into my body. So I started just becoming more aware of what those signs were and what my small tells were. It's like in September, I was so close to burning out that even my partner now is aware of my signs. So I was starting to show all my usual tells, and I was like, "Oh, must push harder." And my partner's like, "No, this is when we go on holiday. 'Cause this, no,
Yeah.
we're not doing this again."
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then just coming to where you are now, and also some of the things you were talking about, the work you do with executives, and in a way, I'm going to put words in your mouth, in a way, making sure that when we are leading a team or heading a business, that we're still sticking, well, that it still makes sense. And actually all this hard work, that it still makes sense for us to be doing. How do you check in with that, just to make sure that you don't become one of these execs that ends up doing the 80% admin and losing a little bit the sense of purpose?
Such a good question. That's why I showed you my model.
Yes.
Because I got to
Tell us about this
September
model.
last year.
Tell us about it. Yeah.
Okay. I tell everybody about this model, but truly it has kept me sane for 3 months, so it deserves the airtime. So until about September of last year, I was trying to do everything at the same time. So I gave up the day job, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep on pushing with my coaching practice. I'm going to push on the brick coach. I'm going to hire a salesperson. I'm going to do some marketing campaigns around specific things. And it came to September, and everything was about to collapse. And I told you, my partner's like,
Yeah.
we're going away for 2 weeks. Like, you will not continue like this. I'm like, yes, I think you're right. And then I came back and I decided to start approaching the business in quarterly priorities rather than like long-term vision and like long-term strategy, which is where like my forte is like thinking long-term, because it's literally what I've been doing for the last 15 years. But I realized after coming back from break that thinking long-term and having a long-term plan is great, but can also become overwhelming, because you will want, I at least, and some people I work with as well, would want to chase all the things at the same time to make as much progress as possible and then burn out again. So I decided to start thinking about the business in quarters. I still have my long-term vision. I know exactly what the big pillars of growth are going to be. I know exactly where I want to take the brick coach, and I'm actively pursuing that. But in terms of milestones or goals, I'm thinking more in quarterly terms. So this is my little model. There's a little red brick at the base of my model, and this represents how I was feeling last year, like constantly on fire, firefighting, about to like sink in quicksand because I was trying to juggle all the things at the same time, about to burn out again. It's red danger. And then I decided for this quarter, which will end tomorrow, so this model will look very different soon. But I decided to prioritize where I was seeing shoots of growth, and that was more in my executive coaching practice. I decided to prioritize, where I was seeing growth coming from. I challenged myself to be more visible. So that's the little I at the front of my model. Okay. So I was more active on LinkedIn. I got in touch with you. I did a whole bunch of other things to like be more visible. And I put talking about the brick coach on the back burner and decided to do some things in the background that are gray and a bit boring, but will help me build the business. But I'll do them again. I'll deprioritize them in terms of how much focus I put on them, but I'll continue doing them. I'll keep an eye out for signs of growth. And when there's enough traction, that's when this part of the model will come forward. Yeah. It'll like...
Oh, well, thank you very much, because that's I think it's quite a personal thing to share. So thank you very much. We've only just met. And our listeners have maybe only just met you. Amal, is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you would like to share with myself and the listeners about either what you do or some story that's around your head? Is there anything else that you want to cover?
Just talking about that model, maybe like one advice to your listeners, like pick one thing and go for it. Like think of one big goal that you've been sitting with for a while, one big thing that you've wanted to achieve for a while, and think of one experiment that you can run or challenge yourself to try and start taking action. Because whatever it is that you want to do, like the first action is gonna be more impactful than planning it for the next 6 months.
Yes, very, very good advice. Now, if we want to direct listeners to somewhere to connect with you or find out more about you, LinkedIn and one of the websites, which website should we send them to?
Come to my LinkedIn, drop me a message. We'll schedule time together. If you're looking for help for yourself, you can go to amale.co.
Yes.
Or if you know you want to invest in your team growth, then you can go to the Brick Coach. But probably the easiest thing is just come talk to me on LinkedIn. It's where I live.
Oh, it's where you live. I like that. Is very 21st century. So, Amale Ghalbouni. Amale Ghalbouni, thank you very much for stopping by. It's been an absolute pleasure. And listeners, if you have any questions, do reach out to her. Her name, I'll just spell the whole name, Amale for Amale, and then Ghalbouni, Ghalbouny. But in any case, we will stick the link in the show notes. Amale, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Pilar.
A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast. We know there are many other shows for you to choose from. Remember to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, and you can check out the full show notes over at virtualnotdistant.com/podcasts. Talking of podcasts, we have another show you can listen to, Management Cafe, which you should also be able to find on all podcast apps. I have been Pilar Orti. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.